This video is made possible by our sponsors, AJA. We'd like to thank AJA for all their support and tell you to go to aja.com for all your production and post-production needs. I'm Gordon Burkell from Filmmaker U. At Filmmaker U, we create courses for film professionals to deepen and diversify your existing skill set. You can learn more at filmmakeru.com or, of course, follow us on Twitter at filmmaker_u. Every week, we interview a film professional to discuss their work, and this week I'm joined by costume designer Colin Wilkes, whose work includes Palm Springs, Savage Salvation, and more recently, the Big Door Prize, just to name a few. Welcome to the show, Colin.
Thank you for having me, Gordon. I appreciate it.
I guess my first question is, I'm wondering if we could go through some of the characters and tell me like how you came up with their looks. Like I think about Chris O'Dowd's family, like Dusty's family, and sort of the key characters in there. Like when you're looking at the script, how did you figure out, for example, what Dusty would look like?
Yeah, I think that each one was so kind of different in their own ways in terms of where they came from. So it was a really fun exploration, kind of explore them individually, because it gives us a bit of the backstory through their clothing, of course. So for Dusty, I wanted him to be somewhere straddling this like juvenile, still interested in things that the kids would have, like a pair of Nike sneakers. He wears these like friendship bracelets that some of his students got him. And then there's the element of Cass's influence on him. So maybe she's bought him that a corduroy blazer he wears often, and there's a bit of dressing the part. And then there's that kind of just like uniformity and the monochromatic kind of dullness and the mundanity of his life. So I wanted to interpret that in terms of costumes in the way that there isn't much variance for his clothes. We shouldn't really notice them. And he probably has the same sweater in 5 different colors. So I think that was kind of the way that I approached Dusty. And then I really did want to intertwine all of the characters together and see how they were influencing one another. And so, Cass, you see when she gets her royalty card, she starts to her character begins to shift and wear more rich tones and textures and pattern, and be a little bit more comfortable with being seen. And so, yeah, and then I think with the kids too, they were so fun because you can really explore how they're exploring their identity. And so there was a lot of creative freedom there, and kind of just making it up, because we did want to be very neutral and ambiguous in the time and place.
I've been a camera person for 30 years, and I fell in love with cinema. I heard there was free film school in France, and I wanted to get into the French film school. I really didn't know anything at the time, but I knew at least how to take pictures. So I said, I'll try for the image department. And then when I miraculously got into the French film school, I fell in love with working with the camera. You're following what's going to be in the movie. So that immediacy that the camera allows is what I loved from the beginning. I'm Kirsten Johnson, and this is my course about documentary cinematography.
Well, you kind of touched on it there, because like I think about the morpho, and the the most obvious one is Principal Pat, where her change after the morpho. But like what are some of the adjustments you made after each person gets their card?
Yeah, I think that they range from delicate, like very subtle, to a little bit more over, as you mentioned with Principal Pat, which was really fun because there's 2 ways that the morpho can really influence these people. Is it like they're going from the inside out, or they going from the outside in? And so in terms of changing them, that posed a lot of fun costume challenges and just explorations, really. So I think, yes, Principal Pat is a great example of that. And we also see, we see Izzy always wearing her dance shoes out, she's always dressed to impress. And just, I think some of the other characters, it was really a little bit more subtle. And someone like Mr. Johnson, I wanted to kind of illustrate that by the magic books he was looking at. So a lot of the colors of the magic books from his color palette, these kind of like pistachios and things that are harking back to the 60s and 50s, and just like interesting kind of parallels between their Morpho card, what they're consuming as they're going in that direction for their potential. And yeah, it looks different too, and it's some have faster transitions than others.
What is it that, like, what is it that you love about what you do? Like, what is it that makes you excited to go into work every day?
I love that question. I think just on this particular project, the writers give such an incredible ground blueprint to create off of. And then also just the collaborative nature of our showrunner, writer, creator, and all of the interdepartment stuff. So what happens when we do color play with costume, and what happens when we have these kind of like little bits and costume gags? How does that help the actors with their delivery? And I think it's really just, how do we make all the puzzle pieces work and still tell the story? And it's always just so much fun. It's so much fun. It's like not even a real job, you know? And
Yeah,
that collaboration is so invaluable.
well, and you've talked about collaboration, so like how, like, I guess there's so many different departments that are going to collaborate with you. So, but I guess one of the key ones though would be the actor. So like, what kind of input did they give you on this? What kind of sort of work with them, or how did you work with them in this situation?
Yeah, so much, you know, we have about 6 weeks prep time before we go into a show on episodic. So it's like a lot of that incubation time is me and like finding outfits that I think look good together, but then it can totally be a different thing in the fitting room. And that's the kind of magic of it. And so there was a lot of input that the actors would come in with. And I think that it always ultimately makes a better product. And so it was really fun to see the actors for the first time, because we are really the introduction to the show in the most physical way. And so it's before the table reads, before they meet a lot of people. And so getting into those shoes, getting into those clothes really helps them embody a character. So we get other ideas from that. We see what shapes on their body feel like appropriate for their action and for their character. And that was what was really fun about episodic, because you can really kind of create the archetypes for each character and then riff off of them throughout the season. And because we are working within this kind of like tightened story time of just really 30 days, the whole season takes place, we have to be intentional about what we're putting them in, because I like the idea of them repeating and feeling like real characters. So those are all things we discuss, you know?
Yeah, well, it's funny because my wife and we were watching it and we were talking about Chris O'Dowd's character, and I was like, it feels like Professor Schlub, you know, like he feels like he's in his clothes, and it's like that's exactly how my teacher or my professor would look if that was Chris O'Dowd, if he was like my teacher.
Totally.
How he would dress.
Yes, and you kind of see like when he's really starting to spiral, he wears his like windbreaker to work, and he's like really kind of phoning it in. And I think that there is something to be captured in that, of that archetype that we all know. And then I also wanted to bring in that kind of like stunted, like how his cast enabled him from going his own direction, you know, and how he really kind of like wants to be in community with the kids and fit in there.
Now, I don't know if this is even a question, because like if you're custom making the clothes, you can always alter them, but like do the actors' body types affect your choice in style? Because like I look at when I was on your website, you do all these drawings preparing, and I could see the design elements, but then I wonder, like, when you get into meeting with the actors, all of a sudden they have a different body structure or a different way that the clothes lays on them. Does that change the style at all?
Definitely. I think that's a really good point too, because when you're working in something like, for instance, when I work in period clothes,
Hmm.
there's also some other liberties that you can take and that we need to take because our bodies have evolved. And so silhouettes that are contemporary don't always look good on all body types. And the same goes for period silhouettes. So there are always these kind of like micro adjustments of fine tuning to make it work on the body, which I find like a kind of fascinating part of what we do, because there's so much math and preciseness that is largely unnoticed in a good way because of, the kind of like, whether it's a comfort point or just, oh, this doesn't really work proportionally. It's always a balance for sure.
Now you
Yeah.
said math in there. Where's the math? Because like you said,
So it's
I'm
like,
not a costume designer, so I wouldn't
I
know.
know it's crazy because my brain doesn't, it works like this, but to a point, and then I have an incredible tailor that I'm just like, my brain has stopped. But
Yeah.
when we grade down patterns to make them fit, or we have to take off 3 inches here and take it in there, how does that all work with the grand scheme of things? And then we have to go back to the pattern, and there's such a delicate balance of each human and their body type. And so it's incredible how if you turn up a hem just a little bit and show a little bit more of the ankle, how much you can elongate the leg, and just all those fine tuning details really help the whole picture and kind of create that. And especially with something like a large ensemble cast, we really needed those kind of like, what are those recognizable silhouettes for each character that were like Mr. Johnson, Izzy with those kind of like big collars and jackets, and she always looks like royalty. So yeah.
Who's your favorite silhouette?
Giorgio. I mean, only because, man, by the time we got to that last episode, we were having so much fun with those tracksuits, and we had, we could make a tracksuit for him in 2 days because we had his pattern, had his body, and so I really got into sublimating fabric and making our own patterns that were specific to Giorgio, which you see is all the G's on the top of that tracksuit. And
yeah.
so just kind of customizing his looks were just such a dream and so fun and funny with all the tracksuits.
Now, I always hear stories about actors trying to sneak away with the costumes.
Yeah.
Did anyone get away with anything that you're going to have to ask back next season?
We definitely had some asks for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, it's always like, I always go to the producers and showrunners at the end and I'm like, so-and-so wants this thing. But yeah, nothing, we didn't give anything away yet. So, yeah.
Now I think about the color palettes of each. So each character is going to be unique. But then when I think about the show, and maybe I'm misthinking this, or maybe it's because like I've watched the trailer, I've watched the show in different parts again, but it always feels like the color palette, specifically around the morpho, is blue, right? It's that glowy blue. So like when you're working on the characters, do you work with like the DP and the set deck to like figure out color palettes that'll match, or do you want them to sort of, I guess, conflict with it to a certain degree? Like I almost feel like Chris O'Dowd should conflict with it because he doesn't believe in the morpho.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a really good point. And so I wanted to kind of contrast him at certain points, specifically when he's standing around the morpho. And we used the color or the morpho blue really sparingly. And that was a cross-departmental decision that Dave had wanted at the very beginning. And it was like the crux of a lot of our kind of conversations in the world. Okay, so there's no blue signs. so Diane and I, the production designer, would really work together with that. And then, of course, the way that Adam Silver, who was our DP for episode, our pilot and two, it just like, how do we create composition around the morpho? And so there was a lot of discussion about that color blue. And then of course, it really made an impact when we see Cass making her sweatshirts that were the morpho blue. But I wouldn't use it until people are getting close to their potential. And so then I would kind of sprinkle it in here and there. But yeah, it was a really interesting thing to work with, and I think that color does really help tell a story in such a fascinating way, and the absence of it.
Now, I guess, what would you think your morpho would have been?
Gosh.
And would you have given up your social security number to a random machine?
That's the one that I keep bucking up against, but then I also am like such a sucker for clickbait, and I will put my, I keep thinking about, would I ever done that? But then I do put my social underneath the last 6. I would hope that I would get a gardener because, like, honestly, that's what I really would love to do, is just spend more time getting to know plants and being out in nature, especially after the end of a job. So if that was a life potential, I'd be so happy.
Have you, because I love gardening too. So have you been to England and gone through any of the English gardens or?
Oh
My gosh. So England has a massive history of gardening and they're obsessed with it to the point where it's like a multi-billion-dollar industry.
Wow.
There was a show called Gardener's World that's been on for 50 years. It's just going through gardens and discussing plants and stuff. Some of the gardens, like if you go to Sissinghurst, they designed part of the garden. It's called the White Garden. And it's only white and sort of silvery plants, so that at night when the moon hits it, it lights up the area. Just little things like that. It's fascinating.
So a lot of them are flowers.
Yeah, well, depends on the garden, right? So like there's gardens that are just, because it's all shade, we have to work with plants and trees, and so it's fascinating.
I love it. And there's such not only is it therapeutic, but it can provide so much inspiration in terms of color from my work. It's like going to the Huntington Garden in LA. It's just like it's really inspirational.
Yeah, if you like the Huntington Garden, because I've been there, you'll be blown away. Like their version of the Huntington is called the Kew, and it's like hundreds of years old, and it's massive. It's like 15 to 20 Huntingtons.
Wow. Well, I guess it's because it rains so much. It's great for it, right?
Yeah. Plus they have like hundreds of years ahead of us to they've been working on it for, and then we're catching up. So
yeah, we definitely are.
So my last question for you, what would you say is your favorite guilty pleasure film or TV show to watch?
Reality TV, because I just find the best little character details in the people. And so recently it's been 90 Day Fiance the other way. And I just love kind of taking bits and pieces from different characters, and I'll always just take pictures, and I have a photo album in my phone, and I'll refer back to them when I'm pitching a project or getting a deck together for a project, for just the little details that kind of like on a granular level make the bigger picture really special and unique.
Is there a particular like era of clothing design that you love?
Gosh, there's so many, but I really love the 30s, and I just did a 1930s film, so it like revived that. And then the Baroque era, Rococo, so 18th century, and then I think really any period is fascinating because it involves a lot of research, which is truly like I just my favorite part about the project.
Oh, interesting. Well, thank you so much for letting me interview you today.
Yes, thank you so much, Gordon. It was great talking to you.
And that's it for this week. Make sure to check us out at filmmakeru.com, or of course on Twitter at filmmaker_you. I'm Gordon Barbakow. Thanks for watching. This video is made possible by our sponsors, AJA. We'd like to thank AJA for all their support and tell you to go to aja.com for all your production and post-production needs.